Welcome back to the podcast of decoding related party transactions through the income tax lens. In the previous part, we covered the basic understanding of related party transactions, the rules, the legal compliances which follow. But in this part, we will be covering the recommendations, the documentations, and the overall structure of a few more concepts. So, joining me today again is Sakshi Dadia. Welcome back.
Thank you, Sadaf.
Yeah. So let's start. Let's get into this podcast. So the first question being, why have RPTs become much as a governance issue as a tax issue?
So, see, there are three aspects to it. The first is base erosion. Whenever a related party or a transfer pricing triggers, what actually is happening is there is a wipe off of the income from the income tax authority's hand. For example, if we are paying additional royalty, as we said in our last podcast, the example that we took, if we are paying additional royalty to the foreign entity and we are claiming deduction of it as an expense, that particular amount gets eroded from the hands of the tax authorities, and that is where the tax authorities lose revenue. The second aspect to it is shifting of profits amongst domestic entities. So what I mean by this is, suppose I have two group entities in India only. One entity is located in a tax holiday unit. So what I would be doing is I would be transferring my profits to that entity, or for that matter to some loss making entity. Because it's a group entity, I'm transferring profits and that gets hidden. But again, here there is a loss of revenue for the income tax authorities. And third, and the most important, is governance. So why governance is important? We have a board which sits on us, who oversees our transactions. If the board itself is not satisfied that the transactions that are taking place are not at arm's length or are related party transactions, it might always be suspicious about the nature of the business, of the profit that we are delivering to them. So it's very much a governance issue if the related party transactions are not handled properly. So to sum it up, I would say related party transactions are economic, governance, and tax issue simultaneously.
But don't you think that applying these rules is only one part of it, but the real difference is actually proving it at the right time to the right person? So it ultimately comes down to documentation. So, what are the important documents or documentation which we have to do, and where do companies fall on this front?
Right. So when related party transactions and transfer pricing triggers, documentation is the best defense that a taxpayer could have. So for this, even the provisions of the law recommend few best practices. Rule 10D of the Income Tax Act says that if an international transaction or a related party transaction is exceeding 1 crore, we need to maintain the following documentation. First is to have a group structure. That is, who owns who is a holdco, who is a subsidiary company, who is a parent company, who is an associated enterprise. We should have a complete group structure in place. The second is signed intercompany agreements. What I mean by this is, there should be, if there are transactions happening between group entities to product level, to service level, to loans, corporate guarantees, there should be signed agreements between the two entities to show the substantiality, the commercial substantiality of the transactions. Third is FAR. What I mean by FAR is functions. There should be defined functions between the two entities. The assets which the company, the group as a whole holds, it should be divided clearly between the entities, and the risks that the entities will be assuming should be defined. The fourth point is benchmarking. What I mean by benchmarking is, as we said that in under arm's length pricing, there should be some comparables. So our transaction should always be related and should always consider the benchmarking of similar transactions. And the last one is definitely documenting the evidence of delivery. If you are doing any transaction with a group entity, the first thought that comes to your mind is a related party transaction. How will you prove that that transaction is substantial? How will you substantiate it? By showing the delivery or delivery evidence. That is what saves you from unnecessary litigations from the Income Tax Act. So amongst these, the two non-negotiables are that your documentation should always be contemporaneous. It can never go backdated and you have to prepare the document. You should always have your documents ready before filing your income tax return. And the next is the benchmarking. Your benchmarking should always be from your current year data. It cannot go back 3 years and use that benchmarking. So your benchmarking has to be recent.
So, what kind of provisions, it's a question of prevention rather than cure, what kind of provisions that a company take to avoid getting into that scrutiny or to predict that certainty even before that event happens?
Correct. So there are two ways to handle this. First would be the transaction has already happened and you are already into a litigation loop. So how you can manage that is to go to a dispute resolution panel. So dispute resolution panel is a consortium of 3 different senior officers. These kind of litigations typically take about 8 to 12 years to resolve depending on the transaction value. So going to a DRP would save you a lot time in your resources as well as your time, because the DRP has a time limit to give a verdict, give the decision in 9 months. So if the transaction has already happened and you have already entered into that litigation loop, it's best to go to a DRP as your first step. Coming to when the transaction has not happened. If the transaction has not taken place and if you think that the transaction is of routine nature, you should always prefer to make advance pricing agreements and submit to the tax authorities. So what advance pricing agreements tell you, help you in, is that you pre-hand tell the tax authorities that these are the specific transactions that I am going to do with my domestic, to my group, with my group entity, and these would be the commercial terms of those agreements, of those arrangements, of those transactions. So the tax authorities are informed prior hand about the transactions and hence they will not question you. And these advance pricing agreements are the best way to avoid unnecessary litigations when these transactions are routine in nature. We in India have more than 600 APAs already filed to the income tax authority.
That's a huge number, I would say, a significant one. So the companies which are dealing with transfer pricing, with related party transactions, what does their compliance calendar should look like?
Compliance calendar, if I talk about, the first thing that comes to my mind as me being a chartered accountant, of course, is filing of Form 3CEB. So what is Form 3CEB? It's a chartered accountant certified report about all your related party transactions, no matter what the amount. Why it is important is because the penalties under these sections are so hefty. If you do not have documentation in place, you have to pay 2% of the transaction value or 1 lakh, whichever is higher as penalty. As discussed in under section 269 SSST, the penalties could go up to 100% of the transaction amount. So these are hefty penalties. So it is always recommended to have a certified copy, certified report from the chartered accountant about all your income tax, all your related party transactions. If I were to suggest, the best, April should be the month where you identify all your RPTs and update your team accordingly and update the records, the documentations of the same. July would be preliminary benchmarking, identifying what the other companies, what your competitors are doing for the same transaction and are you on their same level, or if you're above or below, what is the reason. So you have a commercial backing of the same. By September, you should finalize all your transfer pricings, assess the safe harbor guidelines, if anything applies or if does not apply. You should check for risks relating to secondary adjustments. By October, you should get it obviously certified because the last day to file the Form 3CEB is 31st October. So you should have that finalized and certified and submitted to the tax authorities. And one thing which will go year around is you have to make sure that your transactions, especially with your related parties or the group entities, are all through the banking channels. This is one thing, and your documentation should be contemporaneous. Never plan to make your documentation after your return filing has taken place.
But these are the financial penalties or the financial levies which we can call. What else is at stake for the company in terms of non-financial aspects?
Yes, the penalties and the repercussions of not following related party transactions or provisions as stated in the income tax law, the transfer pricing regulations, or not adhering to the same can cause the company a lot from the tax and penalty point of view, of course, also from a qualitative point of view. I'll break it down into four parts. The first is tax and penalty. We have seen how hefty these penalties are when it comes to non-compliance. So that is definitely a no-brainer that you have to avoid these penalties and additional taxes. Second is since we are talking about international transactions, we know that we also need to pay taxes in the foreign jurisdiction for our foreign entity and also for the Indian entity, the domestic jurisdictions, right? But if Indian jurisdiction applies related party transactions, transfer pricing regulations, we might be taxed in India, but we might not get a refund of the same, or we might not be able to explain that thing in the foreign jurisdiction, and that is where we get double taxed. So that is also a huge loss to the company. The next is litigation. As mentioned earlier, these processes take anywhere between 8 to 12 years to resolve. Apart from resources, apart from the cost involved, these things really impact the company. The resources that are used, the amount that gets involved in the litigation sometimes go beyond the transaction and the tax saved. The last is the reputation. We observed that in Nokia's case, what happened, that the 21,000 crore, the assets got freezed. The acquisition by Microsoft, which was going to happen for Nokia, it had to face many challenges because of the asset freezing of the Nokia. So we have to identify that even the reputation of the company is at stake if it is involved in any kind of dealings here.
So the crux is that the litigation cycles sometimes outlast the life cycle of the transaction itself.
Correct, absolutely.
So it's a substantial exposure to the law and the
Right.
compliance, as I would say.
Right.
So what do you think? What does a good related party transaction management look like?
So from a management perspective, I would always recommend that the few pointers that I have in mind is always decide the pricing first. The pricing, the commercial substance of the transaction should always be determined firsthand. That the agreements should be signed whether it's among the group entity or not. There is no verbal documentation which will help you explain the tax authorities the nature of the transactions. Not needed to say, but of course, bank everything. Don't get involved in unnecessary cash transactions going beyond the limits. Always keep delivery evidence, because as soon as we listen about related party and group entity, something that hits our mind is non-commerciality of the transaction that might not be substantiated, that might not have commercial backing. So of course, delivery evidence is mandatory. Always assess safe harbor eligibility and try to adhere to those rules to safeguard yourself from unnecessary litigations. And for recurring transactions, you should always use advanced pricing agreements, as I said, so that your routine transactions are not hampered by transfer pricing agreements.
All right, that's a fair answer, I would say. And in this dynamic business world, like there is so many new startups coming in, of unicorns, startup, fintechs, everything. So in this, how is the regulatory landscape evolving and how is it changing?
So, as we have all observed, that the tax authorities have become very vigilant. Everything is linked to our PAN numbers, all accounts, all our UPIs, everything, our bank accounts, all of them are connected through some or the other manner. So there is obviously no way to escape the tax provisions. But at the same time, there are few provisions that you have to keep in mind, that that it is evolving at such a fast pace that even if you escape it today, tomorrow when you come under the lens and your transaction is caught, there are going to be hefty penalties. there are 2-3 concepts which are evolving, and they are evolving at a global level, not only domestic level. First is the two pillar. So pillar 2 tells you about minimum 15% tax rate, which is accepted globally. So you can no longer take advantage of tax havens, like I don't want to name, but we have few transactions which were taking place in a country where the taxes are very at a very lower rate. So those were tax havens for our country. But now with pillar 2 we have minimum 15% taxation. Then we have country by country reporting, that the large group companies have to disclose profits, revenue, all of their policies, everything to country by country in wherever they have their entities located. Then we have, with AI coming up and AI overpowering everything, we have AI driven audits which will flag your transaction in fractions of seconds. So obviously there is no way to come out, suppress the transactions. Then lastly, it is automated information exchange between FATCA and CRS. These entities, these organizations help different countries to get details of one group entity, one entity from different country to a different country. So there is a lot of exchange of information happening between the between two countries, between among the world, among the globe, among globally. So there is no way to escape that. So that is how the tax landscape is evolving.
All right. So thank you, Sakshi. This has been very comprehensive, clear, and completely actionable. It was really good to hear such good insights from you and how well you broke it down in such a very easy and a more understandable manner. The message from today and the previous podcast is that related party transactions are normal, like they are your daily part of the business operations, but they carry a more layered risk. For that, you need to absolutely have a economic substance backing it, document it thoroughly, and bank is the most important channel through which you can carry out these transactions. That was all from our side. Thank you so much. This was an Affluence Advisory podcast on decoding related party transactions through the income tax lens. Follow us on YouTube for more such videos and on LinkedIn for more such updates. Thank you so much.